My mother died when I was 6 years old. She was like whispers and memories now, soft and melty. Her soft caress, her warm smile, I recall those nights at home. She was the gentlest being, they said, but with her gone away, all that remained in our home was cold as what sunset light last touched. It didn't take Dad long to fill the void she left. And then came my stepmother, Seraphina, perceptive eyes but a smile that never quite managed to meet her gaze. It was like she were a frieze that spanned our entire lives. To our father, she was sweetness itself and stayed the devoted wife. However, the second we were alone, she would remove it. Now Aurelia, she would hiss, a sharp sound that could cut through the silence. You'll not for a second think you're anything more than a burden. I see it, but your father may not. You are just a footnote to what should remain in yesterday. I took her words to heart, but also learned how never to show tears again. I could not let her know how much what she said hurt. Within the next year, yet again things changed, and unfortunately not for the better. Seraphina had Talia, and overnight I disappeared. Knee-deep in his newfound delight of becoming a father to another girl, poor Dad just let Seraphina take over the helm for me. That would have been like giving a fox tickets to the henhouse. She loved to make my life hell. Dad was absent most of the time, ensnared in his own work or too worn out to register any inner turmoil. In his sheltered presence, Seraphina acted the part of a perfect wife and mother. And I was just the ghost in background. So instead, I wandered and sat, somehow learning to live in the darkness with my voice barely more than an echo bouncing off all that vast nothingness of a place where there had once been home. Seraphina reigned, and no one dared cross her. This was a turn of dial from the guiding hand my mother had brought to our home. And as the days become years that felt like a distant dream of what it means to be taken in by family, and this was not long after the era when I refused my grandfather's offer. Living with Seraphina was a minefield just waiting for the next one to go off in the cold reality I tried to live. Eating was especially excruciating. She knew what skeeved me out, but the dishes she'd serve would be those. When a plate was placed, her eyes flickered with wickedness. Here, Aurelia, your dinner. She'd smirk, placing the very thing he knew I detested before me. Eat up, we can't have you looking anorexic. I would just sit, and the stench alone made me want to vomit. The rare times did gain the courage to push that plate away. Seraphina would begin her theatrics. Eloin, look at her. Your daughter is becoming a queen too fancy for my peasant snacks. What are we going to do with her? To my father, as she cried the blues. Dad, ever the peacemaker, would sigh. Aurelia, you must learn to eat what is given. These meals are made by your stepmother. But it wasn't just the food. As well as letting me know that I would be kept from him in such an insensitive manner, Seraphina's cruelty extended to how the world saw me. I was dressed primarily in a random mismatch of colors and patterns, or dirt-poor hand-me-downs worn down to nearly being threadbare. Everyone else rocking up and out looking like a scarecrow or parrot, leaving me bristling in snickers and sideways glances from the other kids. I asked Aurelia, why are you wearing that? Odd you appear, the children would leer. It would force a lump down my throat, and I'd turn red with embarrassment. I would mutter to myself, I want the ground to swallow me up. Thalia, on the other hand, lived a completely different life at home. She was the golden child, the sunlight of Seraphina and Dad, the loveliest dresses, and the nice meals. The world was bigger than she thought, as a child with an attitude. Then acting spoiled and petulant, she would have tantrums if things didn't go her way, Seraphina always rushing in to smooth everything over by blaming me for the girl's outbursts. Aurelia, look what you did. Seraphina would tell me off. You've upset your sister, even when I hadn't. It was true, too. Whenever Thalia got in trouble for something, she seemed to somehow find a way to pin it on me. You've really stepped out of line, Aurelia girl. Dad would say with that glimmer of disappointment in his eyes while Seraphina wove more silken tales and painted me as the root cause. Always you Thalia sweetheart. Yet even though my body was inexplicably hurting, despite the starkness and cruel lack of explanation for it all, a tiny voice inside me still clung to hope, and hoped for a different day. And one day Dad would catch on to Seraphina lies. That day, I can leave all this behind and find somewhere to belong. A home for where I was quieter than just the stepdaughter that they unnecessary, the more quiet figure in Thalia's ideal life. Living under the same roof as Seraphina was a marathon ordeal. However, out of nowhere a light at the end of tunnel, but so rare and almost like dream to believe. This occurred one simple evening, the kind that all too often happened in silence or Seraphina rants running rampant throughout the air. Dad yelling in the quiet of my room, where I was cloaked by books. Experimenter statistics. Aurelia, come down here. Talking, he said, slightly more serious. A moment's pause with my curiosity piqued. Or why is it that I always wonder what in the world had happened this time, Amos? I descended the stairs to see Dad at their kitchen table, papers set out before him. Seraphina was by then waiting, her eyes worried, a corner wrinkle in the forehead. What's going on? I tried my voice from quivering. Dad coughed and looked at me. Aurelia, I've been thinking. We think it is time to talk about your prospect. You're graduating soon, and, Seraphina interjected, her voice cold. Oh, Aurelia, sure I think it is about time he got a taste of you on your own 2 feet. Isn't that right, Eloin? Dad hesitated, then silenced her with a face. Would you like to know what I'm getting at? Your mother, we need, God bless her, was something for the tuition. That'll carry you through college. I stood there in shock, words so heavy they felt like sand. College? So I can go to college? Seraphina scoffed. Oh, now she's interested. I honestly thought you'd be too busy crying to give a damn about your future. Dad's gaze hardened. Enough, Seraphina. This isn't about you. This is what your mother wanted for you, Aurelia. She had put this money away a while before. Well, she died. It is yours, and I believe that it is what she would have wanted. The room spun around me. College. An escape to get started and you somewhere far, from where everyone would look at me in the cold light of judgment. It made me want to cry. It was a proud day at the ranch, but more than that. Thank you, Dad. I'm not sure what to say. I stammered, my words a mere breath. Seraphina snorted. Well, don't get too excited. It's not a free ride. It's going to be tough, and you're going to have a lot of work ahead of yourself, being as that went so well this time around. Yet her words, which usually cut so deep, only opened a seal on a little ball of hope that had formed in my feeler. It was a way forward, however dim. A way out for the first time in what seemed like infinity years. The events over the following weeks were a dizzying rush of applications, paperwork, and arrangements. Seraphina's barbs persist but bounce harmlessly off of me, as blunted daggers unable to penetrate the shield I had erected. We were in college, stepping into this bright and wrinkled future. I put my bags together, ready to leave the walls of a house that never really became home. As I looked back, it was with closure and no regret. It was more than a simple departure. It was the beginning of figuring out who I am, healing from past wounds and creating a life where I could be more than just the rejected stepchild or that shadow in an empty house. With a smile, Seraphina flung an eye on me as I made for the exit. This is not the end, Aurelia. Life's not that kind. You'll learn soon enough. I looked straight at her with grit. Well, possibly, but then hell, at least I will be learning something and experiencing growth. The best part is that it would all have been on my terms. I left the room at that thought, and with each step I could feel a weight of my old days lifting. And the future, so unknown, even terrifyingly daunting it seemed at times, with more uncertainties than certainties left in its wake. But the future was mine, and that's all mattered. Going away to college was like finally coming up for air after years of drowning. I had left that oppressive life serves behind, and here I was on my way to study law in a faraway city. As the bus drove off, I felt a pang of both excitement and relief in my chest, the two familiar sights weaving away from view. College life was a whirlwind of lectures, libraries, and late-night study sessions. The law helped me. I immersed myself in its pages, relieved for the first time of my life from neglect and seemingly capricious incidents that aroused such confusion. Seasons changed. I would wish holidays back home, but the silence returning was louder than a siren. Nothing. No happy birthday. Or, of course, the holidays. Merry Christmas. Only a whisper returning my own voice from beyond. Fast forward years later, and my blood, sweat, and tears paid off. Then graduation day arrived, and I walked over the stage not just with a diploma of my own, but knowing I had achieved that on my own. I found a job at an obscure little law firm where I buried myself in briefs and courtrooms. I was 25, independent and trying to make my mark in life. And then, from left field, my phone rang one slow Sunday. My heart skipped a beat at the screen flashing Dad. Hello. I responded to the call, warily. Aurelia, it's your dad. I'm aware it has been some time, and I apologize for this. I'm not feeling well, and I was wondering maybe it is time for reconciliation spirit. The voice, more fragile than I remembered. It dripped with ruefulness and pushed at my now tender heartstrings. Dad. Of course I want that too. How are you? What's wrong? I swear the tone in my voice shocked me as I said this. It's a long story, and you know what, some health stuff, and it just helped shape a lot. Life is too short for the grudges or what-ifs. I miss you, kiddo. After all of those years, something in me melted when I heard him say that he missed. As if a tiny padlocked portion of my heart had given way, squeaking open. I miss you too, Dad. I can make an appearance. Check in on you. We could talk. Try to rebuild. The words came out before I had a chance to question them. That would mean everything. The call dissolved in a pledge visit soon, and it left me feeling quite blown around emotionally. I had become so bitter to protect myself from going through life without my family, and just a few words and those walls seemed more porous. Shoving it all into my suitcase in the parked car, I knew that this wasn't just me going home. It was a trip farther back than she and I joked about on our reunion phone call, a journey through uncharted territories to make good what time had broken further still. For the first time in a while, I had something to be excited about. So the drive home seemed extra long. With every mile toward my childhood home, I felt more and more excited in my own heart. I'd not been home in years after I moved out for college, and seeing all of them again scared me. As I pulled into the driveway, I sat for a moment and gathered my thoughts. The house appeared unchanged yet different in some way, smaller, less threatening than the one recalled from my youth. I took a deep breath and got out of the car, walking up to the front door. The door opened before I could even knock, and there was Seraphina standing in the doorway with her eyes judging me from stem to stern. Why, it's the princess returned from her magical journey to empty cafe spaces in Lille. You're still dressing like you paid with food stamps, ha! Seraphina jeered. Her words stung in the way that they always used to, a hole shot through my self-esteem, and I blurted out all over again. However, it was no longer falling on deaf ears of a submissive-tongued girl. Clothes do not make a person, Seraphina. Well, I said, it's what they have inside, steadying my voice. Her laugh was bitter with no laughter in it. Seek at you, Mr. Wise-ass graduate. Come in then. Your dad's been worried about you. I experienced a flood of memories as I walked in the door, sequential rooms where for years I had lived under Seraphina's ever-watchful eye. He was sitting in the living room and looked so meek, frail, and repentant compared to his former self. I went up to him and said, gently, Dad. His gaze met mine, and I saw a moment of pain. Those words were born from the combination between bitterness and relief. Aurelia, you're here. I thought about you and all the things. The time you needed me more and I wasn't there. I truly apologize for this, so sorry. The reality of his voice really struck me off guard. It's okay, Dad. We can't change the past. Well, the point is we're here now. He nodded, his hand lifting slightly, and I grasped it. A silent apology of sorts and an attempt to start the mending. Serafina stood in the doorway expressionless. Heartwarming, the beautiful family reunion, she said sarcastically, ignoring her jab and focusing on my father. How have you been, really? Concern laced my words as I asked. It's been tough, Aurelia. I mean, the sickness, it would knock me on my ass. It makes a difference whether you are here or not, he said, his voice trembling but sincere. When I looked back, Serafina had stepped out and Talia was peeking peek-a-boo style into the room with a curious look. She was not the little girl I remembered but an 18-year-old woman, looking to me like she did not know where or how she fit into this unexpected family gathering. Thalia, come here. A very long time, I said, smiling slightly at her. After a moment she walked forward. Hi, Aurelia. You seem different, she said, a soft caution in her voice. Different in a good way, I hope, was my attempt to break the ice. She smiled weakly. Yeah, different good. It was an awkward conversation with the years of separation, and Serafina weighing heavily in our relationship. It was a beginning, however, just a chink in the wall that had divided us for so long. The following days, I looked for a place of my own in the area, and visited Dad every chance that wasn't already spent trying to make up for years lost. Our conversations were not easy. They hurt sometimes and healed others. Part progressed, but a great deal of recovery. Serafina never let a minute go by without reminding her she was there. And Talia, the way Dad was changing with her influence, it brought an ember of hope to my heart that maybe we could learn how to be a family again, damaged and broken as it might be. Back in my hometown, life was beginning to fall into a pattern, a tenuous one between the old and new. We were always fretting over Dad's health, but suddenly we had this odd tranquility we'd lacked for years. Yet soon, that form was to be shattered in a way I had never seen coming. One evening, when as I was leaving Dad's house, Serafina cornered me in the corridor, a look of an odd determination behind those stiff eyes. Dad wants to talk, has something serious related to his property. You need to go there, her voice the low, urgent whisper. Sobered by her tone, I nodded my head. Okay, Serafina, we will see if you can convince Dad. We all head to the sitting room, excitedly poised. Dad seemed sadder than usual, his face next to a pile of papers on the table. Thalia sat next to me, her eyes shifting between Dad and I every couple of seconds. Aurelia, Thalia, I have been doing some thinking. Dad started, his voice although steady was slightly tense. Life has got harder and made me prioritize what is important. Serafina interjected, her voice harsh. Eloin, just get to the point. What are you trying to say? Dad took a deep breath. I am changing my will. I've been unfair to you, Aurelia. Unfair for a very long time. I want to make it right. I'm giving you $300,000 of my estate. If only to honor your mother's memory. Tilde. Here was silence, heavy words hovering between air. Serafina's face paled, her lips thinning into a tight line. You can't be serious, Eloin. I don't like it, Meredith. Aurelia has been out of the picture for years, and now she just comes right back in here, claiming part of our family's estate. What about Talia? Serafina broke the silence with a hard edge in her voice. Dad remained firm. It's my decision, Serafina. Aurelia is my daughter and she deserves this. It's long overdue. I was left speechless, the emotion fighting in my chest meant to be a tornado of feelings, gratitude, guilt, vindictiveness, all twisted up. After a short pause, Talia finally spoke up, her voice coming thinly but distinctly through the speakers. Dad, it's your choice. I just want my family back together, and that is more important than any will. Serafina threw her a cold glance, but did not engage her in conversation. Something flipped in the switch, and our family dynamic would never be quite the same. The weeks that followed became a delicate dance of decorum in the house. I visited often, and each time it felt less like terror, almost like a normal visit. But the most surprising of all, Serafina was actually behaving as a decent human being, never mind slightly blunt at best. Serafina came up to me one Sunday afternoon as I was leaving Dad's place, with a nervous look on her face. "Aurelia, I am so sorry. Do you mind if I borrow your car? My car is out of commission, and I have an important appointment." "Oh, this isn't important and everything. Not that I wouldn't bug you otherwise," she said in a tone far too casual. I hesitated, sensing the keys to my car locked in my pocket like anchors and detection of her apparently true trouble. "Sure, Serafina. Just be careful, all right," I said, handing her the keys. She offered a rare smile. "Thank you, Aurelia. You're a lifesaver." Uneasily, I took a cab home. I went back for my car the next day, expecting it to be parked out in front, but nope, empty space. This confusion quickly turned into concern, and I rushed back in. "Serafina, where's my car? Is that not external?" I asked calmly. She glanced up from her magazine, looking at him with bewilderment. "What do you mean? It should be right out front. If you don't let me inside, you gave me the keys, do you remember?" With a scowl, Dad, who sat at the table too, added his 2 cents. "Thalia went out for a drive this morning. She didn't tell you, Serafina." Serafina's face went pale. "No, she didn't. Why the hell would she take your car, Aurelia? She knows it is not hers to wield." Before I could answer, the ring of my phone cut through it all. It was the local police. The officer on the line told me that my vehicle was in an accident, and when he did, I felt my stomach drop. Calls by Sky News to Thalia Muggs were answered with a reply phone message from Sister Felicity, but she was not willing to comment. She was in the hospital. Everything began to whirl through the room as I broke it out. Serafina lurched and placed a hand to her chest, gasping as she fell into one of the chairs. "Oh God, what have I done?" Tertuliasona pronounced, whispering a handful. My dad and I looked at each other, eyes wide in disbelief. "What do you mean, Serafina? What have you done?" I screamed at him, my voice turning frantic. Her words chilled me to the bone when she finally got it in her toque. "I sabotaged those brakes. Thought it was going to be you driving. Notthalia. I was just swallowing the wheel about everything. Oh my God, how angry I get. Thalia is my only daughter, and I would never have wanted to do anything to hurt her." The confession was a punch to the gut. Shock, anger, and disbelief went through me as Dad's hand shook while he ringed into the police. Where once it was a room to reconcile with, now there is only treachery and ruins. I had my whole world upended as soon as I realized what Serafina had done. For years we tried to piece together what we could of a kind of family, and that one unthinkable act destroyed it all. There was only the silence and how I knew that if things had gone slightly differently, waiting for them would be a wait to speak with police, and stability. Part of me was concerned for Thalia, even though in the hospital, because someone meant to punish me. Part equally had felt so betrayed by what Serafina had done that it seemed like she must have been capable of anything and everything. Forgiveness was a journey I had hazarded yet struggled to make, understandably so after the circumstances through which we'd both been plugged. But here things were indeed unforgivable. The police would show up, and life would go on spinning out of course. Serafina was dragged off, wearing only the shock that showed on her face minutes earlier. Dad and I sat there, my ears ringing so loud from her confession that the silence of him sitting next to Dad was almost deafening. "I can't imagine doing that to your own children," my dad said, choking on the words as he was one draw call from his grave. I made a move to touch his hand. "Dad, we have to be strong for Thalia, especially now when she needs us the most." A single tear leaked from his eye down one tawny cheek and, unable to hold back the flood of emotion any longer, he nodded. "You're right, Aurelia. I mean this. Oh my God, all these years, I did not know who the person was that I am living with. The next several days were a blur of trips to the hospital and bobbing around in confusing divorce papers. While Thalia had stabilized, it would be a long process to recover. Looking at her in the hospital bed, so delicate and innocent, it was something not of this world what slapped me over there, only a need to protect. Sitting next to her bed one night, there was a silence and Thalia's voice rang out faintly, "I am so lonely. Aurelia, I'm genuinely sorry for all of this. I never knew. I never thought." I squeezed her hand gently. "Thalia, it's not your fault. You didn't know. We will experience this together as humans." My pop, sitting quietly until now, spoke up. "Both of you," she said, "you're my girls. What Serafina did, it's despicable. But we're family and that folks is the rub. A new day will dawn." The weeks passed, and life began to establish a new pace. The trial of Serafina was the subject everyone spoke about in whispers, but under our roof, we bound over healing and building anew those cracked foundations. Thalia herself was a miracle really in her recovery. The smallest step or tiniest smile each day was progress, and she stood as living proof to fighting. The stronger she grew, the closer we became. That evening I found myself sitting in the room with Dad, a semblance of peace coming over both of us. Perhaps a clean slate and nothing but new beginnings for all of us. All of a sudden, Dad realized and turned to me. "You're right, Aurelia. We have been given that second chance and we should not squander it. We should move past what happened before, build a new future for us and her." And so we did. We sold the house, that wretched reminder of our pain, and found a new one where we could grow together, build something beautiful with those broken bricks. Starting over was never easy, however. Together we built the strength to continue onwards, writing a new tale comprised of hope and love.